This is a special meeting of the Board of Finance of the Metropolitan District Commission, Monday, July 10th, 2023. We call it to order. Before we have the public comments or the rest of the meeting, I think everybody here can see that we have some new technology here, and just so that everybody's familiar with what to expect from it, I'm going to ask John Myrtle to give us a brief presentation on how it works and how to use the microphones and so forth. So, John, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is John Myrtle, and as the Chairman said, everyone in the room can clearly see that there was an audiovisual upgrade. So the way the black disc with the red circle in front of you are the microphones. We've been working through and testing, and we think that the best approach is that we keep them muted until you wish to speak. And you can see the buttons in front of you, the white microphone button. You can simply press that. Any of the four on there that you can reach, that will unmute it and it will turn green. I also have a panel up here that I can control, but we need to kind of work out a few things to get that going. Unfortunately, we spent the last 3 weeks with the contractors in here. You can see there are cameras. We still have a few more things to work out with the cameras, so we won't be utilizing that today. And frankly, probably not for the board meeting on Wednesday, but we'll get everything up and running in full effect. And as a reminder, these microphones, they pick up more multi-directional than the other ones where you had to speak directly into it. So again, just a reminder to keep it muted if you're not speaking on the floor, to avoid picking up side conversations.
John, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
If you were just talking and the chairman's mic went red, but did you touch the?
I just turned it on. Yeah, it was
No,
off.
you just turned it on, but it was off. It was
Yeah.
on and it just went off automatically. Is that?
No, I turned it off.
Oh, you turned, okay. Yeah. And then if you're talking and I press,
They're both on.
they're both on.
Yep. And again, I need to work out. Again, I can mute everything. I can't unmute or mute specific microphones. I'm looking into kind of doing ranges or something like that. But yeah, you have control of the one in front of you, and you can mute it or unmute it.
I like to talk.
Yeah.
How are the cameras supposed to operate? Are they going to like turn around and it's someone who's speaking or something like that? They're going to pick up whoever's speaking. They're going to.
Exactly. So they're automated, and based on the microphone that starts picking up the voice, they will direct to that person. Each microphone has not just one camera. Each of them has each microphone spot has a primary camera, and if that one was already on somebody else, then there's a secondary camera that would go to the next person. Again, the goal is for hybrid meetings, remote meetings, people that are remote will be able to see into the boardroom, see who's speaking, and then also we'll be able to have them with their cameras on, so when somebody from above speaks, we'll be able to see who it is. And with the cameras, there will be a little bit of, they don't want to jump to somebody the instant they hear a noise, so there is a little bit of a planned delay. So somebody will start speaking, and then once it recognizes the camera would shift to that person.
No facial recognition when you leave your name at the bottom when they zone on you?
Correct.
And they'll only get your good side then.
Okay. Well, I'm sure.
Yeah. Sure. I'm thrilled to have CLA here for the Board of Finance. They're going to produce with a quick 15-slide, not a lot of bullets on each slide, but 15-slide presentation on our financials. You have the governance letter in your meeting minutes. You have the federal single audit, those grants we get through DEEP for the clean water and through DPH for the drinking water. That $47 million, that's a short report. But then you have the audit, the CAF, or the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, following that. The 15-page presentation is going to summarize that into a quick presentation of what our financials did in the prior year. We have our to come up and do our presentation for us. Thank you.
Right, and I'm gonna try the new technology first, so I might back up here if it doesn't quite work for me. All right, so I'm just going to go through the terms of the engagement, the executive summary, the financial highlights, federal single audit, governance communication, and the upcoming GASB pronouncements. So as far as the terms of the engagement, CLA was hired to express opinions on whether the basic financial statements are presented in accordance with GAAP, express an in relation to opinion on the schedule of expenditures of federal awards, which is your single audit, express an opinion on compliance related to major federal award programs, provide a report on internal control over financial reporting and compliance with laws, regulations, contracts, and grants, and provide a report on internal controls over compliance related to major federal award programs. So for the financial statements, or the ACFR, that the big thick document that you have, they received an unmodified opinion, which is the best opinion available. We had no findings on internal control over compliance, and this year we had no management letter. For the federal single audit, again, we had an unmodified opinion over the major federal program that we tested, which was the Clean Water Fund program. And we had no compliance findings or significant deficiencies in internal controls over that program. So just to go through a very high level on the financial highlights, under the 2022, which is the first 3 columns in this chart, you have your governmental activities, which are made up of your sewer fund, capital projects, debt service fund. They kind of all roll up into that governmental activities column. And then you have your business type activities column, which is your water fund, hydro, and your internal service fund is actually split partially under governmental activities and partially under business type. So the governmental activities ended the year with a total net position of $938 million. And the business type ended with $238 million for a combined total of about $1.177 million. The biggest increase was capital assets, and that's mainly construction in progress with the Clean Water Fund loans and some projects that are being done in the business type water fund. There's also 2 categories on here, the deferred outflow of resources and the deferred inflow of resources. Those they're going to fluctuate year to year. They're kind of what smooths out the pension and OPEB changes between the market and what happened versus what the actuarial assumptions were. So those go into the deferred inflows and outflows of resources, and instead of hitting all those changes every year, it kind of hits a piece every year. So those are those 2 categories. The next slide, which is kind of small, so I hope you guys all have it in front of you. For the governmental activities, the total revenues this year were $173.7 million versus expenditures of $97.2 million, which gave a net change in net position of about $76.5 million. And under business type, the total revenues were $115.4 million versus total expenditures of $76.3 million, to give a total change increase to fund balance of about $39 million, which was your total of the $115 million increase in net position for this year. We also wanted to just take a quick look at the pension and OPEB trust funds. These are the funds that hold the asset for your pension and your OPEB plans. So the pension trust fund at the end of the year had $230.8 million, which was a decrease from the prior year of about $48 million, mainly a result of the net change in fair value of investments. And again, that category is going to fluctuate with the market. So this was as of 12/31/22. If you looked again at your assets or your investments today, these numbers might change. So this is measured as of 12/31/22, and that was the decrease in the net position at the end of the year. For the OPEB trust fund, you ended the year with $11.3 million, which was a decrease of $4.7 million. And for this one, the total contributions were $11 million versus total deductions of $15.5 million, with the one-time adjustment of about $7.3 million from the Internal Service Fund this year. So your total net pension liability was $97.8 million this year. So that your net pension liability takes your total pension liability, which is calculated by the actuaries, less that previous page, what you have in assets to pay that liability. So that's where you get the $97.8 million for your net pension liability, which increased about $55 million from last year, and it's about 70.24% funded. For the net OPEB liability, that ended the year at $125 million, or 8.27% funded, and that actually decreased about $53 million from last year. So overall, your pension and OPEB, one went up, one went down, so they stayed about the same in total between the 2 years. For the federal single audit, the total expenditures this year were $47.6 million. As I said earlier, the major program that we tested was the capitalization grants for clean water state revolving funds. And we had no findings on compliance or internal controls on that program. So now I'm going to go to our auditor's communication, which is our required communication to the board. This year, GASB 87 was adopted. That was the lease standard, and I'm actually going to go into that a little bit more on the next slide. Included in any financial statement are significant estimates. We review these estimates for reasonableness, make sure there's no management bias in them. So the ones that are included in your financial statements this year are capital assets, or the useful lives of capital assets, which is used to calculate depreciation. Your net pension and OPEB liability, which you use an outside actuary to calculate. The allocation of the net pension and net OPEB liability. So this one takes your net pension OPEB liability and splits it between the water fund and the sewer fund. So a certain percentage of the liability goes to the water utility fund, and a certain percentage goes to the general fund or the sewer fund. The claims incurred but not reported. These are the healthcare costs that are out there, that the estimate of what's going to come in after year end. And again, that's third party is used to calculate that. And then your allowance for doubtful accounts on the water and sewer billings based on prior collections, or management's estimate about on what may not be collected. So we review all these when we're out here for the audit to make sure that they seem reasonable, that management's not trying to change the presentation of the financials with one of these estimates. Throughout the audit, we had no disagreements with management. They didn't consult any other accountants because they didn't like our opinion on something or the way we were suggesting they handle something. We didn't have any difficulties. It actually went very smooth this year. As far as leases go, attached to your auditor communication letter, you're going to see what's called a past adjustment form. So with the lease implementation, management evaluated the leases and the liability was not material to the financial statements, so it is not included in the financial statements. What you have is a form that basically says it's out there, it's above an amount that we have to report it to you, but it was analyzed by management. It isn't going to change the reader's opinion, so the the liability was not brought into the financial statements. So that past adjustment form will show you the amount that was passed on by management to be included. Now, that's something that's going to have to get looked at every year. If for some reason, MDC enters into a substantial lease, then it may have to come off that past adjustment form and go into the financial statements. But it is just letting you know it's out there, it's not material, it was passed on as far as including it in the financial statements. There was no independence issues. And then just quickly going through the upcoming GASB standards, there's a laundry list of them. I think the biggest one that's going to apply to you guys is Statement 96, which is very similar to the lease standard, except it's subscription-based information technology arrangements. So very similar to the lease standard, is there a liability out there for leases? Now, GASB is asking, is there a liability out there for software arrangements? So that's something we will work with management over the they've actually already started looking into it and been in contact with us to see if that's going to be something that's material that we need to look at, how much work is going to be involved in calculating the liability if it is material. So it's something we're working on for 12/31/23. And so just some more GASB standards. I don't know that I need to go through all of these unless anybody has a question. But these are for 2024, so we'll be talking about those in the future. And that's all I have. I know that's a very high-level summary of a very big document, so if you have any questions, let me know.
Any questions Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
I made a note of that. Hold on. So I believe they were copiers and some laptops. It was nothing major. Postage machine, I think, was in there when I looked. So these are leases that are over a year. I think you have some billboards that we looked at and analyzed, but those are less than 12 months, so they don't fall under the standard. So to fall into GASB 87, it has to be over 12 months, and I think the bulk of yours were laptops, copiers, and postage machines. No problem.
Any other questions?
So, I better be fast, right? So, it's Jessica? Mm-hmm. Okay. If I can address this question, Mr. Chairman, directly to Jessica. So you just presented to us, as I understood it, a 15-page document that you went through page by page that we do not have in front of us exactly.
Oh, it is on the agenda. So there's a presentation.
It's attached to the agenda.
Then the single audit, then that's why it's so thick this month.
Well, let me just first say, it would have been,
A solid blue page will mark the beginning of it. It'll be real evident.
you're right. Okay. So, I received a package with 4 or 5 pieces, which is fine. And I did my best to try and go through each one. Well, it looked like from this presentation, which was fine, I have no argument with the presentation, but it would have been a lot easier to pick up those highlights faster instead of going through, and we did not have this document as it's presented here prior to today.
John, I think it was sent out last week, was it not?
Yeah, I think Commissioner Hoffman, we sent you a package of the full audit that we had received approximately a month ago, probably by this point. So we sent that out to commissioners. We mailed you the hard copy. The PowerPoint presentation was included with the agenda that went out on Friday. So I think Julie might have mailed you a copy, but I don't think it got there. But it was emailed out and it's available
Well,
to all the commissioners.
no, you're absolutely right. And what I had was a copy that I picked up, which again, did not have this in particular. So that information just did not come as I expected it to come. Nevertheless, has nothing to do with you. You did your job. I'm just remarking on it. It would have been a whole lot easier to see those flashpoints right up front. And so the other question I had for you, if I may, has to do with what I'm calling the management letter, which outlines basically the findings and how you responded to certain things. And the grades for all these things were excellent, no question. I see all that. In years past, it wasn't always the case all the time. So I'm happy that it was presented, and the documents themselves are much clearer than they've ever been. If anybody else has a remark to that point, they were improved remarkably, how they're presented, except that I didn't get it all. So it would have been good if this was in my hand, this set of prints up front, whether it's a week ago, 2 weeks, whatever it was. And that's another question that I have. I don't know if it's you, Jessica, or if it's for Bob exactly, our financial officer, whether the calendar that we're using provides enough time for the Finance Committee to actually receive information in a timely way and has enough time to process, digest, etc., until such time as we have an opportunity to discuss it. And looking at my own set of documents that I did get and marked up, it would take me the better part of the hour to address each point that I'm raising as I go through this. And I did go through it. And I'll start with something that does reflect on the auditor's firm, which is in the very first paragraph that was clearly prepared by, I guess, artificial intelligence, but there's a typo that was really confusing. And if you look to the paragraph that starts out, we have audited the financial statements, yada, yada, and we get down to the very last sentence, and we start 3 lines from the bottom, as well as certain information related to the planned scope and timing of the auditor, of the audits in the audits. So if you just want to clarify what that actually means, I think it means we have to eliminate a few words. But nevertheless, I did go through this, and you do find some things that pop out at you, and they're not necessarily 100% clear. But again, it has to do with the whole set of timing, and maybe, I'm sorry I didn't pose the question exactly to Bob, but I am doing it now, and that is there any way we can get this timing a little better so that we have more time to digest it all? So that is my question, Bob, if you would,
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman, if that's okay.
This year, we finished the audit by the end of May. The prior
Sorry,
year,
Bob, would you mind
we
getting-
finished it by the
Would you get to a microphone? Hey,
The 2022 audit was finished at the end of May this year, and it was published soon thereafter. And immediately, I got it like on a Tuesday, I sent it to John on a Wednesday, and it went out to everybody that day. So
It's John Myrtle. We emailed the audit to all the commissioners on June 8th. So we got the PowerPoint presentation from the audit firm at the end of June, and you're right, that didn't go out to commissioners until we sent the agenda out on Friday. But the full audit was sent to everybody on June 8th.
If I may, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
we're happy to send out, this comes up every year, Commissioner.
right.
And I do appreciate your need for a hard copy. So, you know, we will make sure that next year that we have at least, you'd like at least a couple of weeks.
Well, it's
At least
all
a
about
couple of
that time.
weeks. So we'll make sure that before we present Bob, our findings, that we send out hard copies on at least 2 weeks prior to the meeting.
right, we'll work on that. And perhaps we could actually print a copy of the audit itself and send out that hard copy, because that's been available for a month. But we'll work at getting the 15-page presentation out a couple weeks in advance instead of just the weekend before. Sorry about that.
Not a problem. I appreciate that. And remember, so that you don't feel put upon, we've raised certain questions over the course of time, and you have done a remarkable job, by the way, to correct many of the bumps that we've seen over the years. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
You know, while I have the Finance Committee's attention, just one thing that maybe it's not really the purview of the auditors, but that we follow every year, particularly in advance of the budget season. You know, we have that fund balance policy for our general fund, for our unassigned fund balance to be between 30 and 35% of the revenues of the general fund in a given year. On page 22 of the audit, you'll find that we had a $29 million unassigned fund balance. And on page 24, you could see that we had $90 million worth of revenue. So that comes out to 32.2%. So we're smack dab in the middle of our fund balance range of 30 to 35%. So that's really solid going into the next year budget. We won't have to fund the fund balance to get up to the minimum 30% because we're right in the middle. So thanks for that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any other questions from the board members? Commissioner Curry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Don't go too far, Bob. Thank you, Jessica, for that very concise report. In the report we just received, Bob, it mentioned the pension fund and the OPEB fund. And for anybody looking at that slide, they go, why is there such a discrepancy between the two? And I don't recall it. When I read the audit back in June, is there anything in there that lists or includes the established date of the pension and of OPEB, so that people would realize reading it, if there's anybody out there that's not a commissioner that wants to read it, that it would give a better understanding of why there's only 8% funded?
Right, it's a great point, Ruth. In the early 2000s, remember, our pension and our OPEB were pay-as-you-go. You know, if someone retired, you had to pay them $100 a month in pension, or you had to provide their health care insurance. It would just be pay-as-you-go. But pension was the first one that required us to take an actuarial valuation of those promises we made into the future and start funding it. And so we've had pension for a lot longer. We've been funding pension for a lot longer. We have 70% of the total liabilities in assets and investments in the bank. But we just started pre-funding those healthcare promises, that OPEB. It was authorized at the end of 2019, and I think our first deposit into the to the account was 2020. So you're absolutely right. I'm going to have to look in the audit to see if we have a footnote saying that the OPEB was just began its pre-funding, 3 years ago, so that they understand that it's only 8.27% funded. That's a great idea. We'll make sure it's added if it's not there. And if I find it, I'll shoot you a note.
That 8+% is huge when you take that into consideration.
When you look at the nationwide pre-funding of an OPEB liability, everybody has to report it. But establishing a trust and pre-funding, not many people are on board, and we're one of the first ones. I think Norwalk started, I don't know, 10 years ago or 7 years ago, but there's not many of the 169 towns and cities that actually have independent audits. There's not many that have established an OPEB trust. So 8.8 is great, but you're right. It would be more meaningful if I had a footnote in there that said we just started pre-funding in 2020.
You started, for just for your knowledge, started in 2006, I believe.
Wow, that's great.
I'm not sure it's for you.
I like him in the hot seat, it's okay.
Has to do with the total federal awards expended. Is this in compliance with,
It's different. Can answer or.
Sure.
We're required under our old consent order to spend an average of $90 million over a 5-year period. The new consent order, the old consent order still sits there because we've got projects that are within that original consent order, larger projects like the tunnel. But we also have a new requirement under the new consent order, which is $45 million.
we are in compliance with?
Yes.
Yeah, the federal single audit that you have there that shows the 47 million, I'm doing it from memory. I think it's about 44 million grants and loans for the deep clean water, and it's about 3 million grants and loans for the DPH drinking water. Well, the reason it's called a federal single audit is because both of those sources come from the federal agency EPA through, they're called pass-throughs, the DPH in the DEEP funds. So we're just reporting what we've received from the state revolving funds, DEEP taking care of clean water and DPH taking care of the drinking water. That is not our total spend. We have that rate stabilization fund where all that money that's going in, and we have a lot of spending that occurs from that fund as well. So
I understand that, Bob, but the title of this was still federal awards, so to me, it just kind of reminded me that with the original consent decree, there was a requirement that we spend 90 million, so that the project wouldn't die on the vine somewhere. I think that was like, you gotta keep going with this, and, but I wasn't aware that it changed that much, so it cut in half with the new consent decree, 45 million.
Yes, the integrated plan cut that in half. But these are two different numbers. These are just monies received versus the consent order spend requirement was different.
Yes.
Yeah, I read it said expended, that's
Yeah,
why I asked the
yeah,
question. It
yeah.
said-
Yeah,
Right.
we've expended, our average has been actually $118 million over the last 5 years. We've actually spent far more than the 90 million. But that's the whole idea of the integrated plan, that you're slowing things down and spending less over a longer period of time. So that's why the integrated plan, affordable to. Doesn't change. Correct. Exactly. Yes, exactly.
That was my question. Is there any other?
Thank you. Thanks, Vanessa, very much. Jessica, thank you so much. It's good to see you. Okay. Bye-bye. They can't. I'm sorry, which one? Oh, yes. Sorry. Carmen? Let's see. Number 5. This thick package, I don't know if you're looking online, but after the governance letter, the federal single audit, and then the big CAFR, you'll get to a page that is that has a 5-1 in the lower right-hand corner, and that's a summary of the project closeouts that we're requesting in this meeting. We're asking for about $25.6 million to be deauthorized. We had a very similar meeting last month. As a matter of fact, I think it's summarized in the meeting minutes at the front of the agenda, where we explained why we deauthorized projects. In summary, is that we're given 3 years to spend bonded dollars. And if we arrive at the end of the second year or halfway through the third year and we don't think we're going to spend it, we will ask for it to be reallocated. And in this case, these are projects that we've identified, 11 of them in water, 14 of them in sewer, and 4 combined, that has that equal $25.6 million that we have no more spending on, and we're asking that they be deauthorized. So that summary is on that 5-1, but following that on pages 5-2 and 3, this came from your last month request. You'd say, Bob, you bring these closed out projects to us every year. Why don't you tell us when they were authorized, what they were originally appropriated for, how much spending is left, not just how much you want to deauthorize. And so that's what we did with the charts on page 5.2 and 5.3. We listed for the water, sewer, and combined projects. There's also a 4th category for the clean water. But for the first 3, we actually show you on the left side of the page when the project was authorized, for how much we've spent of that permission to spend. That's what the appropriation is. And then how much is left that we're asking be deauthorized. And so that's what the agenda item 5 is in front of you, to authorize this $25.6 million worth of projects on water, sewer, and combined, in addition to the clean water projects listed there.
Are there any questions from any commissioners about this? Can you, do you have a question? Go ahead.
Not a question, I just want to say thank you to Bob for putting this on paper for us.
Yeah. No, it was a great suggestion. It was our pleasure to do it.
Anybody online have a question? Bob, on page 5-3, so we have contract number 4 on the South Hartford conveyance tunnel. It was $50,000, and it said that we expended the amount. I'm just trying to remember what that was for, that contract number 4.
Yeah, contract 4 is for the design, well, contract 4 is to connect the overflows on Franklin Avenue to the new tunnel, which will comply with the consent order to eliminate the overflows to the Weathersfield Cove. And as you recall, part of our renegotiation with DEEP recently, we just received the revised consent order. We've been awaiting that. We just negotiated for contract 4 to be pushed out 10 years. We've agreed to put in a date. DEEP last week asked that we add a date to that project. So they've added a date of 2034. And our position with DEEP is, like in North Hartford, we may not do contract 4. Contract 4 was, again, building big stuff to collect overflows at the river rather than to address at the source. So our logic will be over the next 10 years or less than that, actually up until probably 2028, we'll start looking at separation on Franklin Avenue to eliminate the overflows to the Weathersfield Cove, just like we're doing in North Hartford. So that is money spent for preliminary design, Jay?
There's preliminary design and easements and.
Yeah, easements. So it's monies that we spent to date on that contract for.
Yeah, that's why, I mean, it's a small amount by
Right.
comparison to everything else, only $50,000.
Right, and
so-
we won't, this very process, the next agenda item, we would typically, we're gonna be asking for additional monies for the clean water project, for these new projects we proposed in North Hartford. What we would have done, which we're not going to by design, we would have put contract 4 on this list and say, we're gonna push the whole authorization or allocation, but we're not ready to do that yet because we got a lot more discussions with DEEP and engineering to talk about how we address issues on Franklin Avenue. So we're gonna wait a year and figure out some of these projects that we put on hold with DEEP, how they materialize over the next year.
Okay, are there any other questions? All right, hearing none, I think there's no action required on this.
No, we need somebody to make a motion to approve.
On number 5?
Yep.
Close it.
Yes.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
well, I guess we need a motion to approve.
Move the item.
Motion's been made, seconded. Is there any other discussion on it? Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor of accepting? Oh, I'm sorry, didn't hear you again. Is it Andy? Go ahead, Andy, I'm sorry.
So, yeah, I'm gonna need some more education, not today, but more education on that contract 4 as well, because from what I'm hearing now, that we will not have to pull out of the loop, so to speak, as we were promised earlier, so I would feel that my mayor are gonna have a real problem with that new information.
Wants more information on contract 4.
Yeah, Commissioner,
Yeah, I
this is,
mean, you know.
yeah, if you mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
Scott Chelsea, we will have a discussion at BPW. We have a BPW meeting Wednesday. So we'll be talking regarding that topic, about what projects got pushed, the new consent order, which again, we just received, but we spent the latter part of Friday afternoon going through the details with DEEP, which I'm comfortable with. I haven't reviewed the document from what our conversation was on Friday, but if it is what was presented to us on Friday verbally, then we should be fine to recommend the board approve. But it does push a number of larger projects that were really designed to capture overflows at the river, like Franklin 4, down beyond first phase of the integrated plan, which is, in this case, we've identified it as 2034, sorry. But we're proposing, and we will propose to the board, that we're not gonna just not do anything. We're gonna actually propose to do separation work on Franklin Avenue to actually achieve that goal, similar to what we did in North River.
Get that, Andy?
Yes, thank you.
I'm having a hard time hearing him. Can you, is there like a speaker?
Yeah,
thing
we're
going on, or-
we're working through the concern is too loud of speakers causes echo and feedback. We were testing it today. We'll continue to work on it because it is quiet.
John, do these amplify?
No.
They don't.
Okay, well, we are at a point where I'm gonna call for a vote, so, all in favor of, adopting this resolution, signify by saying aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Aye. Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Okay, so now we're on item number 7.
6.
I'm sorry, 6, jeez. In a hurry to cross out numbers. Consideration of potential action regarding the supplemental appropriation of $129,900,000 for 2023 integrated plan and authorization for issuance of bonds or notes not to exceed $129,900,000.
Now, I can cover the financials part of what you have in front of you. This is a request for an appropriation, just as you did on December 5th when you approved our capital improvement plan, our CIP plan. Remember in December, for the first time you saw that fourth category. Remember, we always see water, sewer, and combined, but we saw that category that was IP. And in December, you approved $46.3 million worth of integrated plan appropriations. Remember, an appropriation is you just giving us permission to spend. And then I come back to you if I need to borrow money, or I tell you whether I'm getting it through grant. And that's what this document tells you. It's requesting about $130 million worth of integrated plan programs. On page 6-1, you'll see about $124 million are new programs, and about $6 million is increased authorizations from the prior approval. Each one of these projects has, following page 6.1, has a description, a purpose, and what's important to me is and the bond language that has to be approved, but is the funding sources. You'll see in most of these projects that, in what you've heard before, is a lot of the funding is going to be 50% grant from DEEP. But it will also tell those projects that are not getting funding and that we have to fund exclusively from our rate stabilization fund. But all of that detail follows that summary on page 6.1. So now the purpose of the projects, I don't know if Susan is going to, okay.
So, as you know, we mentioned this, everyone has been completely engaged in the issues associated with North Carver. You've already approved what we're planning to do. It took us 6 years to get to the point where we were prior to April of this year. And we had a CIP schedule through X, and that X was $47 million. And now we've taken that $47 million plan, thrown it out the window, and now we're going to execute a $177 million program up in North Hartford. So this $129 million is what we need to be authorized so we can start design and construction of all of those projects that are going to change the integrated plan, the consent order that we're going to ask the board to approve on Wednesday night. We're not, at this point, going to ask you to deauthorize the previous $47 million approved in December until next year, because we just don't know, we're not gonna spend it, but we're just, or allocate it, we're just not ready to do that yet. So, this is basically saying, we need authorization to actually start digging. We've made a commitment to the community. We're gonna start digging by July. We're actually planning to start construction activity on Durham, thank you.
Next week.
On Durham Street, on July 17th. We're literally ready to go, so we need Board of Finance to approve the 129 million. We're not spending 129 million, but there's a lot of projects rolled into that, and we need authorization to start. Even though we won't be spending all of that in 1 year. And so we've got to get moving on that, and we need the next meeting we have, which is the new sewer ordinance. We need that as part, because we need to build work on private property and do the laterals. And some of the money Bob referred to is we're going to be using our own money for the Clean Water Fund in a short time to do certain things because of the timing of all the projects. So this 129 is so that we can get moving to comply with the new consent order that we're going to ask the board to approve on Wednesday night. And nothing in that 129 million, none of that is any different than you've seen. We've given you that numerous times. That's the documents that we gave to Dee. It outlines all of those projects, roughly 12 projects in that area.
As first, actually allow us to do.
Well,
You're talking about laterals
yeah. So remember the board is going to authorize us to work on private property, right? We already do this on private property. When we do a separation project or a big one project, we already do private property work. The only difference between what we're proposing to do now and what we've done in the past, I'll give you an example. You have a property on Cleveland Street. The property was separated, right? The street was separated. So there is a home with a sewer lateral that goes to the sewer pipe. We add a storm pipe in the street. We bring a new storm pipe to the house. We reconnect inside the house. We do all of that for free. It's all part of the capital investment that we've already done in the past. The only difference here is we're also going to fix the existing lateral. The existing lateral we would never touch. It wasn't part of the project. Now we're going to possibly line the lateral or replace it. So those are the differences, Commissioner, that added that extra $60-some-odd million to the plan for North Hartford. We're addressing the existing lateral and either lining it or replacing it. It's really the major difference in the new program.
I understand that part of it.
Yeah.
My question was, the funding source, does it allow us to spend private property or with our properties or on liabilities, right?
Well, each of the those projects that involve private lateral work, private property, coupled with the modified consent order, getting us to funding of that private property work. Improvements to private
And so my last question is a technical one, and I'll leave it.
Yeah, the only difference, Commissioner, is we've been doing this for a long time on private property. The only difference is we never got grant money for it. So that's the only difference. We've been doing separation work. We do on a regular basis our backwater valve program. We're always in basements doing work. The difference here is we're getting 50% grant. That's the difference. And we're adding another lateral, a replacement or a lining of that lateral as part of the program.
We can think about this before we talk about in there, are we actually separating
Yes,
the roof drains?
everything. Yep.
I may be the only person, I don't want to bore you. I may be the only person left associated with the MDC who actually worked on this program, my construction company in 1977. Where we actually went in the house, separated the roof drains from the sanitary, built a new lateral for the sanitary, left the old one for the storm,
Yep.
and then connected them to a new sanitary.
We're doing the same thing with a little more sophistication. We're adding a sump pump if we can. And we're putting in new laterals. So we're putting in 2 new pieces of infrastructure to the property.
They got paid $3.
I'm
The
sure.
federal government actually paid for that, but they stopped.
Yeah.
As Bill always reminded us, they stopped at the clean water. Okay, are there any other questions about this particular, item? So, go ahead now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner Payne here. 2 questions. All this work, is that going to solve the flooding problems for North Hartford? And second question is, all this work that you're doing in Hartford, we're experiencing the same problems in West Hartford and Newington and Weathersfield, I believe. So how are those other towns getting addressed?
Yeah, Scott Jolson. So the answer is no. It is not going to solve street flooding. I will tell you, and this is a real life experience, example, sorry. Mrs. and Mr. Green, which live on Granby, in corner of Plainfield and Granby in that general area. They were part of the original Granby 2-5 separation project, which we did in 2018, about a $30 million project. So they received backwater valves. They, in this last storm of Monday, the Monday before, which we got, whatever it was. They did not, and in the July 4th storm, 3 inches of rain in 40 minutes, they did not get sewer in their home. And we just did a presentation 2 Monday nights ago. We talked about the work that we're going to do in North Hartford, and this question came up, and we're very frank. This project is not going to solve street flooding. This project is not going to solve dealing with the July 4th storm was a 154-year storm. It will not solve that. It's not going to solve a 50-year storm. But what it will do is make sure that sewer does not come in your home. We can't stop water, groundwater, from coming through your window wells, coming through your front door, coming through your garage basement door. We can't stop that. But what we can do is stop sewer from mixing in our system and coming into you and backing up into your home. So that's the goal. Now here's something very important. On July 4th, the storm that we had, 3 inches of rain in 40 minutes. As some of you might have seen, Pulaski Circle, 2 feet of water, traditional. It happens in a major flash flood like that. 154-year storm. We got 0 calls, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, who's Chris, on Albany Avenue. Now, we might have, did we get any sense?
There was one church that we
Oh, the
we made
church.
appointments set with, and then we were
Okay.
addressing, but that was it. Just
But
one problem.
one phone call from Albany Avenue. Now, as you can remember, August of 2021, there were 3 feet of water in Albany Avenue. And there was minimal flooding in Albany Avenue. Why? Because the streets were clean. That's a fact. The streets were clean. And the streets that were flooded in Hartford and with some in West Hartford, if you look at, we have the pictures, debris, garbage, leaves, sticks. That's what clogs the cover of the catch basin. The water can't drain. But we proved by Albany Avenue being clean, we proved that it can handle a 150-year storm. That's a fact. So we've got to make sure that our message has got to be clear. We're not going to solve street flooding with our projects. It's just not going to happen. That's not what they're intended to do. But what you can do to mitigate the impacts to street flooding is what we did on Albany Avenue, which is the city keeps the street clean, and the system does what it does. And it was able to handle a 150-year storm with no flooding. So, anyways.
Second part of my question?
Yes. Would you? Other towns, Commissioner, we've talked about this before. I don't, the towns are going, West Hartford, Newington, and Weathersfield are going to have to invest in infrastructure. It's gonna have to become towns are going to have to invest, in my opinion, EPA, street flooding, stormwater is gonna become the next clean water project. In 1974 Clean Water Act, it took the regulators 50 years to realize it's stormwater, stupid. It's stormwater that's causing the problem. So the only way that towns are going to be able to address this sewer issue is if they build storm infrastructure in their town.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Payne again. That really didn't answer my question. I know we have a stormwater problem throughout the whole district.
Yep.
And all the towns should be working on it. But we're starting something major in Hartford.
Yep.
My question is, are you addressing the other problems that are in West Hartford? And, I mean, things happen in West Hartford.
Sure.
Just Lynbrook.
So Scott Chelsea again, so the ordinance tonight, which is next, that is the start of addressing the issue. We have the backwater valve program. The backwater valve program is available to all of our towns, not just Hartford, not just North Hartford. We also, with the sub pump program and all that good stuff, we've also hopefully incentivized towns like Newington, Weathersfield, and West Hartford as part of our program to, we're providing replacement laterals under the ordinance for all of our towns, not just Hartford. So hopefully the goal is that our towns, we went up to North Hartford the other night, 2 Mondays ago, I think, 2 Mondays. And we had a lot of people there. It was a very good meeting. We had a very good turnout and a lot of discussions. We had all our staff there. We did the same presentation with the backwater valve that we did here for the strategic planning meetings. It was very well received. We actually had staff there to actually sign people up for backwater valve program at the meeting. We're trying desperately to get people, the free program is free. So we are trying desperately, Commissioner, to get backwater valves into every home that is willing to accept them. There are homes, it's just practical, there are homes that do not want a backwater valve. And for a lot of reasons. So it's a little bit of a challenge, but there's no place for the stormwater to go except the MDC sewer system.
Thank you.
Which is illegal.
Right.
It's a legal process in those towns. Mr. Chairman, we also talked about. We also talked, Scott, about the issue of education
of looking at the backwater flow valves, inspecting them. We will then be able to go on private properties. The Committee on Community Involvement is looking at that option now. So we're going to expand that program and ensure that people do maintain them and explain to them how they're maintained, and if they're not maintained, to participate in that process.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, we're already.
Yeah, I know.
Extended time and-
We are building actually a full-scale model, 2 models, for the backwater valve. It's a very difficult thing to explain. And so Tom Tyler, our plumber in action, Tom Tyler and his staff are gonna be building an actual mock-up of a toilet, a backwater valve, an upflow toilet, so you can physically see how the difference between what you have now and how it works. And we believe that'll be very helpful in explaining what the chairman just mentioned. But it's a big issue, and it's a very expensive one for all of our jobs.
Dominic, I don't know if you finished answering your question.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, just quickly, to follow up on Commissioner Payne's question, are we going about this town by town, or do we need to appropriate some finances for a larger district-wide effort to convince people that this not only is a good thing and better thing and so forth, but if we go town by town, I'm not saying it might be a bad thing, but if we go town by town, that only allows the town that knows about it to make a complaint or file whatever. And if we have a district-wide effort, I think that would be in our best interest. But I just sort of pose that.
If I may, so this is district-wide. Obviously, the projects that you will hopefully approve tonight, 129 million, that's specific to North Hartford, right?
Right.
And we've taken $300 million worth of work on the clean water project, and we pushed it down the schedule 10 years in order to achieve that, right? So there are things that have been pushed, like the Franklin Avenue Contract 4. But there was no other way to achieve the goal of, as Commissioner Curry asked, it's not going to cost us any more money. So the only way we could actually stay within our framework of what was approved under the integrated plan, the rate structure, was to push $300 million worth of work. We still plan to fund new laterals, replacement laterals for anyone in the district under the Clean Water Revolving Fund. So it's funded. And but we don't have projects in those towns. There are some projects in West Hartford. There's lining projects everywhere. There's a lot of lining projects in Weathersfield, Newington, but not to the magnitude. We are focused on North Hartford for sure.
Fine. Thank you.
Mr. Curry. I'm sorry, Alan, would you?
No, I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to be sure I understand, Scott, we're right now looking to take action that will fund phase 1 of Hartford, no other community. So, let me finish. So, my neighbor, everything goes wrong and she needs lines replaced, backflows installed. How is that going to happen if we're only funding Hartford? Is that going to be because, or be funded by the increase in the district due to the analysis charge forecast?
So, Commissioner, two things. The board approved this past year $2 million in the backflow preventer. So that money, which is being charged to the Clean Water Fund, is for everybody, right? There are, what we said in one of our biggest fights with DEEP, was DEEP said, and I said this in our presentation, I said the projects that we've identified in North Hartford was $177 million.
And they said, we're gonna give you 78 million grant. And I said, well, that's great, but I can't afford the other 75, right? So what I said to the DEEP was, I'm gonna expect North Hartford residents and everybody else to pay the other 75, but East Hartford is not gonna get anything. So we budgeted in our budget for things that aren't 50% grant. So like a Lowry East Hartford, be funded by the Clean Water revolving fund, but we're just not getting 50% grant yet. The goal is the North Hartford projects will prove to DEEP that what we have suggested, community benefit style projects, rather than catching it at the river, are actually more beneficial to the river than what we've been doing for 40 years. So the goal will be that we'll continue to provide free laterals and backwater valves under the Clean Water Project, but everywhere outside of North Hartford that's not on that list will not get 50% grant, but they'll still be paid for by the Clean Water Surcharge without raising a penny on the scale. Remember, when we approved the integrated plan back in when we submitted it in 2018, we had an affordability scale. It showed every town, here's what's gonna cost you. Then when we got it approved by DEEP and by this board, December of 22, September of 22 from DEEP, it has the graph. Here's what the Clean Water Surcharge will be over the next 40 years. That was our scale, and we said to DEEP, it doesn't make any sense to provide all this benefit to North Hartford and then charge them more for it, right? Or everybody else. So that graph, which is, the infamous graph, it goes up to about $7.50 by 2040. That's the graph that we said, we will match that graph or be below it. And so your question is, long answer, yes. Anybody in East Hartford, any of our towns will get a free lateral under the ordinance, the new ordinance that's going to be proposed next, be paid for by the Clean Water Surcharge, and we're just not getting 50% grant for it. Yeah, but the ratepayers are paying it anyways, right? The difference is, either the ratepayers pay for a big pipe to collect overflows at the river, or they're paying for a new lateral through their water rate, and there's no increase to the rate structure.
Thank you Mr. Chairman. Question I'm not sure if this is a Scott question or not, so I'm not sure. Don't want to take you away from your conversation, but has the program been marketed well enough where people know this is happening? Has NDC also gone to community events to make them aware that while we're at this community event, we have a table or some sort of booth set up, or pamphlets or some sort of marketing tool to get this information out there to residents? And then also, are we only doing this as we're doing work already in the area, or are we doing one-offs if someone calls the office or the line requesting this sort of work being done?
Thank you, Commissioner Scott Jellison. So we have not marketed this because we need board approval, right? But we have explained this in North Hartford for our NRZ meetings because of the dynamics of everything going on with the EPA and DEEP. So we had to explain it to North Hartford residents for them to understand it, because we committed to start digging in July. So we had to go forward, but we will do exactly that. We will, once the board approves, we will present it. There'll be one-offs. We have a meeting every Wednesday with about 30 people in this room right here, and that's all we do is coordinate this project and this new ordinance, because it's a lot of work. What we're doing here is tremendous amount of work. Again, we spent 6 years planning $47 million worth of work, and now we're going to do $177 million by July. So yes, there's a lot of coordination, and we will have one-offs.
Yeah.
You'll have one-offs in Hartford, you'll have one-offs in East Hartford and Weathersfield, and they'll all be part of the program.
Okay, and then also to follow up with that too, I just want to know that is there a budget put aside for this sort of marketing tool down the road as we keep on going with this project?
Yes, there is.
There is. Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Curry, then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What brings up a good point, and this is for Scott. In the marketing, you've got different marketing tools. You've got West Hartford, who has a huge need. And I had breakfast this morning with a very wise and knowledgeable individual who reminded me that MDC started its separation in 1941 and paid for by the town, and now we're like 100% compliant. So, and the issue is that over the weekend I was with 70 individuals and many business owners, and for some reason they decided to hit me on the cost due to the Clean Water Project and the fact that they were unhappy because it really didn't benefit them, but it benefited a lot of other people. And they were aware it benefited a lot of other people, even outside MDC towns, but yet they were footing the bill. And so I think your marketing tool for each individual town is going to be dramatically different. You're going to have to create several marketing programs for each of your target base.
Thank you, agreed.
If there's nothing else, we do need a vote on this, and, by the way, this is, sorry, not the final vote, this is gonna go to district court, and the exact same information is in front of us tonight, it's gotta be approved by the district board, so there will be more opportunity for some questions about it. I have to say, Tom Tyler, I'm looking forward to seeing this model, so please call me when it's done. I got, you know, I mean, okay, I think we had one in '77, we had a model back then, so it's probably downstairs there somewhere, so. Anyway, all in favor of the.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, we need somebody to move the resolution.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you're right, I thought we did that already. Is there a motion, on, item number 6, on the supplemental appropriation of the $129,900,000 for the 2023 integrated plan? Is there a motion?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. So, we've already had our discussion, so I'd ask all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any, okay. Got them all. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously, or there's no abstentions, so the motion carries unanimously. And item number, thank you, by the way. Item number 7 is just a discussion regarding the potential reimbursement of property owners. There was no vote envisioned for this tonight, so.
I'm just gonna go quickly through it.
Yeah, it's gotta be quick for Scott.
Yes, the timing, so they just told me to shut down one. So, this is just for consideration, it's really, we really should have a long discussion about it at the board level. But this ordinance that's gonna be considered tonight, is to provide a free lateral replacement or lining of someone's lateral that failed, right? The ordinance does not include, free laterals to a new development. So if someone's building 100 homes, as part of our typical ordinances for development, we do not, if the cost to provide service to the development, needs to be borne by the developer, not by the customers. So it does not include a new lateral for a new home. The question that we need to ask the board is, do you want to reimburse anyone who has paid for a new lateral for whatever reason, for it failed or it just needed to be replaced, it was leaking too much. We developed a program in 2021, which people were able to hire a contractor and have a lateral installed or replaced, not so much lined, but that was at their expense, and we amortized it, and it was put on their water bill, and that's how they paid for it. The question is, for the board, and just information for Board of Finance, is that we're asking the question, do you want to go back? Because we've had questions from customers, whether or not this program was going to be retroactive, and the answer is,
we permit about 1,000 laterals a year for a lot of different reasons. For this specific reason, a lateral that failed, we're guesstimating it's $250 a year. That's about, if you used a rough $5,000, it's about $1.2 million to go back. Our recommendation is to not go back, just move forward, but it's up to the board. It's up to, you know, that's why we bring it to you. It's something to think about when we do have our meeting on Wednesday night, whether or not the board wants to consider going backwards and being retroactive to some date.
The reading is retroactive to 2021 January.
We haven't included any retroactive.
Wasn't there
Reference to the old plan, but it's not.
Yeah, that's the plan that was approved. That was the lateral replacement program. And that's why we used that as a reference date. If the board wanted to consider going back to that date, or they want to consider going back further, or not go back at all. It's really a board decision, but it's approximately a year. So for the last roughly 5 years, yeah, it's really it's a financial decision, and it's something that the board, you know, should be aware of.
You're saying that there was no reference
No, we referenced the date. Yeah, we referenced the date specifically because that's when the lateral program works. So we have people that have there's about $80,000 on the books for the lateral program. So it's something to consider, I guess.
It's gonna get, this is going to get discussed at the board level.
Yes,
No vote on
yes,
it this
yeah.
evening, but.
Yeah, just something to think about.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I would say that. Well, that does have the same limitations that going forward does. You know, you can't just replace it because you want it. There has to be a reason.
Right.
What's wrong, there has to be something
Right.
wrong with it. So.
Right.
All right, there's nothing else, we have opportunity for citizens to speak. And, any citizens that want to speak? Hearing none, we'll ask for an adjournment without objection. Anybody want to keep going? Alan?
Just quickly, I wonder if it's possible, I guess we have to do this, for a follow-up session with a representative from CLA to come out to answer some more questions that may still be out there.
Yeah, I'm sure CLA would be amenable to any requests from the Board of Finance. So we could coordinate through John a convenient date for everybody. But to make it as productive as possible, maybe I could gather questions in advance, and then perhaps we could give a narrative answer that would eliminate the need for the meeting, or you could review the narrative and say, no, I still want to talk to him. But however you want to handle it, we'll be happy to do it.
Yeah, I would suggest that, I think we should do it, Alan, I think it's a good idea. I suggest that you let the members of this, know that you're looking for questions. And
Yeah, sure. But I would imagine it's part of their contract. Usually, they would have the name and phone number contact listed in their documents. There's nothing. It's like they're the big guy, and that's it. It wasn't very user-friendly, as I recall. So, anyway, if we can arrange that, Bob, I appreciate it. John?
Will do, thank you.
Okay, so if there's, if there's no further objection, motion to adjourn. Motion's been made, second.